You're listening to the Curious About Cannabis Podcast. First of all, what contaminants are you testing for broadly across all of the states and countries that you've got labs operating in? And then what are the most common contaminants you're actually finding in cannabis products?
So in general, the cannabis contaminants that we're looking at, I won't give a complete state roll call,
yeah.
but in Oregon, at the very least, contaminants we're looking for are pesticides in concentrates and flour, residual solvents in concentrates, and then elsewhere on top of pesticides and solvents, California, Florida, etc. We're also looking for heavy metals, at least the big four. Those are mercury, cadmium, lead,
Arsenic.
and arsenic. And then also microbiological contaminants. In various states, those would be either E. coli and or S-Tech, which is Shiga toxin E. coli. So it's like a sero strain of E. coli. Salmonella, Aspergillus, a number of different species required in Florida and California. And in some other states have maybe more broader, like total mold count or total aerobic plate count, which would be like non-specific bacteria.
Yeah.
And Canada has some regulations like that really just mimic kind of food and drug manufacturing safety.
Yeah. Basic screens, just like, okay,
Yep.
there are no detectable forms of basic bacteria here, so no need to really go deeper, that type of rationale.
Classically, the most common contaminants that we find are definitely pesticides. I would say 4 or 5 years ago, it was like a rampant thing, where, at times in Oregon, some times of the year, we were seeing pesticide product failure rates at 20% or more.
Yeah.
I think the industry got a little bit of a black eye, but honestly, those rates today in Oregon, also in California for pesticide fails are, in the 2 to 4% range. It's really actually dropped. Fairly low. And I mean, back in the day, I mean, a lot of those pesticide fails were products that were, consciously sprayed on the material. Either they didn't know that those materials were persistent in the product, or didn't care, or didn't consult the list of things. I don't know.
Yeah.
But today, mostly when we talk to clients that have pesticide fails, it's either a mistake or something that was overlooked, or
sometimes unlisted,
an unlisted product, or just kind of a lack of control. And not properly trained farm technician found something maybe in the farmhouse garage instead of in the sort of validated growing area, and used it by accident or whatever. Sometimes agricultural overspray from either neighboring cannabis farms or, in Florida, a lot of product is coming up with malathion. But there's parts of Florida where helicopters fly over the neighborhoods spraying malathion, in the swampy areas. So if you're not paying attention to that in your greenhouses,
just sucking it in and blowing it over everything.
Microbial contaminants, at least on the Salmonella E. coli end, honestly, we don't really see any significant failure rates with modern, shelf cannabis. That stuff is all pretty clean. Those are contaminants, generally come from manure or bad hand washing. And so in California, occasionally we do see some problems with that in manufactured or infused products because they're, I guess didn't wash their hands making the cupcakes or whatever. Again, that's pretty low.
Yeah.
And not really a cannabis thing. We do detect aspergillus. We use PCR or polymerase chain reaction as a screening tool. So this is a way to look for like the genetic signature of a bunch of different microbes rapidly in a reaction. And then when we do get positive hits, those are always confirmed by direct culture plates.
Mm-hmm.
So aspergillus is still kind of a thing. This is why a lot of states require moisture content measurement and or water activity measurement. This is a means of benchmarking how dry your materials are and that you're cured to a certain level.
So you don't have to worry about mold or different types of fungi or bacteria growing out.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, while we're talking about mold and fungi, aspergillus and other dark colored molds produce their own sort of form of pesticides called mycotoxins. There are a number of mycotoxins that are required to be tested for, again, not yet in Oregon, but I would imagine we'll see that within the next year or two. To the chemists, they look much like pesticides with respect to like their chemistry and how you analyze them on a mass spec. But California has a specific requirement for mycotoxin testing, and so I would say the failure rate for those are about similar to like the mold failure rate. Those are really the signature of mold.
Yeah.
But they are persistent, where you probably would only find mold in cannabis flower. Just like pesticides, we do occasionally detect mycotoxins in more finished products, in resins and infused products.
Well, there's mycotoxins once produced are super, super stable. They're very heat tolerant.
Yep.
Even under high pressure, they seem to be able to survive those processes.
And unlike most pesticides, like we know mycotoxins are hepatotoxic and persistently or cumulatively, they cause cumulative liver damage. And so like your lifetime dose, if you will, matters. A lot of pesticides, you certainly don't want a lot of them in your bloodstream. Unfortunately, you actually do from food. Yeah. But a lot of those are, very well broken down by the liver, and they're generally not that toxic below a certain level. That sounds funny to say, but still.
Yeah. Well, the dose makes the poison, right?
Yeah, exactly. Mycotoxins, not so much. Yeah, they do cause liver damage cumulatively, and so it's definitely not something that you want in your food.
Yeah, and they're pretty carcinogenic too, from what I understand. And it's something that when Oregon was developing their rules, I was surprised that mycotoxins. There was discussion about it early on, and then it kind of fell out. But it was something that we did, some work trying to look at that, and we were able to confirm that, like, it's around for sure. Yeah, it's floating around. Not super common. But, just in the context of public health and safety, and especially with how popular extracts are getting, just more and more in vape pens and dabbing and all this sort of thing, I have some pretty serious concerns about exposure to mycotoxins as well as pesticides and everything. But pesticides seem to be one of the first contaminants that states catch on to that needs to be tested for. And so there's, a lot more control over pesticides than there are mycotoxins. And it's so common for producers to take flower material that might be moldy or otherwise, can't be sold as flour, and to extract it, turn it into, a concentrate, and then sell that.
So what about heavy metals in cannabis products?
That when states started passing rules about heavy metals, a lot of people speculated that it was not going to be a thing. The cannabis flower, there's all kinds of study that shows that it can bring or at least remove metals and such from the soil.
Right.
But if you look at those papers, not many of them actually looked at distribution of those metals in the plant, and that sort of matters. So California started requiring metals testing for all products as of January 1st. And so there's a nice little data set building there. But Florida's been doing it for quite a while. And I recently gave a talk looking at about 7,600 metals tests of various different products that we've tested in Florida over the last couple of years. And the trend is, I guess summarized that it's not very typical to find heavy metals in cannabis flower or resin. And so I think this will be borne out by some other research, but I have this hunch that, cannabis and hemp sequester metals from soil, but it probably stays in the roots.
Yeah, there was a study that came out.
I'm not promising that.
Yeah.
And I'm not a doctor.
Right, yeah. There was a study that came out fairly recently. I can't remember exactly when, that looked at distribution and found that definitely the concentration is higher in the roots than anywhere else.
Sure.
Which makes sense.
But that's not to say that we don't see heavy metal failures.
Exactly.
And actually in pretty significant quantities.
Right.
And so what, I guess the summary of all of that is that the grow environment, the grow atmosphere, the grow materials, plus any manufacturing stuff downstream,
Right.
is a huge culprit in metals contamination.
Well, and something we see in the natural products industry broadly, in the context of finished products, if someone's making a manufactured product with other herbs, that sort of thing, if they're not, even if the cannabis is coming out clean, and when I say clean, I mean, natural products broadly are going to have metals in them. And so it's really about the concentration, like how high is that level? It's rare to not see metals. But if you're not controlling for the metals concentration that is actually in other component ingredients that are going into a finished product, then that can cause problems, even if you've done all this control on your cannabis.
Absolutely. So as a spin out of this, this is based on real data. We're starting to help vape pen clients screen vape pen or cartridge brands. And we're actually pushing towards standardizing or validating an actual method for screening vape pen carts.
Wow.
Right? Because there's different ways that if you think there's metal in there, you can put acidic water or glycerin or vegetable oil, and for different time periods and temperatures. And so a lot of labs have started to look at this because it's sort of a big thing. I mean, I first heard of it in like 2013 or 2014. Jeff Raber of the workshop published some paper where they were finding heavy metals in the vapor stream of low quality vape cartridges. So we've been thinking about it for a while and encouraging vape pen manufacturers to, when they buy these materials, get several different samples and bring handfuls of them to the lab, and we'll wash them either with like acidic water or sometimes MCT oil.
See what might come through.
And a lot of them indeed do leach a lot of metals, and it's primarily lead.
Yeah.
But also some mercury.
Yeah.
We do see some arsenic fails at times in cannabis, and usually it comes from seems like so the story there was that I had a manufacturer or a farm, an indoor place, and they were anticipating doing metals test on their final stuff, and so they didn't really want to wait until the end and see. And so these guys were smart, and when their plants were fairly immature, just at the start of the budding stage, like we went and collected a bunch of materials. So basically immature buds, and they were loaded with arsenic.
Oh, wow.
So that, prompted a test of the soil and the water and the media and everything that we could. And turns out at the end of that story, it was a bunch of nasty rock wool.
Oh, wow.
So it was,
The initial growth medium. Wow.
It was just off the charts with arsenic.
Wow, these little things that, we get so focused on the actual cannabis product. That's so easy to not think about that. I mean, it makes sense now that you say that. But that's something I genuinely have not ever thought about, that like rock wool, might be a source of contamination like that.
But also, extractors and other manufacturers of value-added cannabis stuff, you use blenders and pumps and metal tubing to transfer materials and glass and other containers to store those in, and those are all potentially sources of heavy metals.
Yeah. Wow.